get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this event, OLA event with Mahtab Narsimhan and Helen, who I will be introducing in just a moment. Today, we are going to be talking about Mahtab's latest middle grade novel, Valley of the Rats. The structure is very simple. It's going to be a chat between Mahtab and Helen, followed by time for questions from the audience. So throughout this session, if you find that you have questions about the book or for the author, you can put that in the Q&A function below at the bottom of your screens. I would also like to talk about a special discount that we have going on for OLA participants specifically from now until May 31st of this year. If you order 20 or more copies of Valley of the Rats for your classroom, you will receive a 35% discount. So in order to receive the order form that you need to place your order, please contact a rep at our booth, the Cormorant Books booth at the OLA conference, or you can email us at info@cormorantbooks.com and we will help start the ordering process with you. I've included that information in the chat so that you can copy down the email information. So I'm going to introduce Helen now. Helen Kubiw is a reader, writer, teacher, and teacher librarian, and the blogger behind CanLit for Little Canadians. She has served as chair of the Forest of Reading, a jury member for several Canadian Children's Book Awards, and a reviewer for Quill and Choir. Most importantly, she's an enthusiastic promoter of great Canadian literature for young readers, and we are thrilled to have her on here today to interview Mahtab. So Helen, I'm going to let you take it away. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Chantal. Thanks for that lovely introduction. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mahtab. Mahtab Narsimhan is an author of everything from picture books, chapter books, middle grade novels, young adult novels, and her debut novel, which was The Third Eye, won the Silver Birch Award from the Forest of Reading, which tells you something about the quality of our work. And the sequels to that book, the Silver Anklet and the Deadly Conch, were received very highly as well. And then she wrote The Tiffin, and The Tiffin, again, Red Maple nominee, Manitoba Young Readers' Choice Award nominee, the Saskatchewan Readers' Choice Awards. Amazing, amazing books. And now we've got a new one. And the new one is Valley of the Rats. And that's the book we're going to be talking about, published by Cormorant DCB. And I'm delighted to interview Mahtab about her book. Welcome, Mahtab.
Thank you so much, Helen. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am that I get to be interviewed by someone as fantastic as you. I've always been a fan of you, of your blog, and your championing of Canadian literature. So thank you. And I'm happy to jump into questions with you.
Oh, excellent. Well, let's talk about it. It's called Valley of the Rats. That title, I have to ask about it. I have to ask about it because it's a little bit creepy and it's really, really interesting, but I need to know, is the Valley of the Rats a myth? Is it a reality, or is it a figment of your imagination?
The last one, total figment of my imagination. I mean, that's what writers do, right? But as with everything, the seeds of the story came from two documentaries that I saw on YouTube. One of them was a National Geographic documentary on the Karni Mata temple in Rajasthan, where rats are considered as reincarnations of people. And that is why they are revered instead of reviled. Like everywhere in the world, you would be, screaming from rats, you'd be killing them, you would be, basically extermination because of the plague. But in that particular temple, there are 20,000 rats, and they are allowed to run free. It's a major tourist destination. And it's very easy to find that. I'm sure Chantal, if she's listening, she can put the link up on the chat, but it is fascinating and horrifying at the same time, because I was just, and the thing that you have to do, one of the rules is you cannot wear your shoes inside the rat temple. You have to leave them just in case you end up stepping on a rat. And I was looking at it and I was like, this is horrible, but this is also such a great story if I can weave it in. And then there was another PBS documentary that I saw, which was about every 50 years in a little state called Mizoram in India, there is bamboos which flower every 50 years, and those flowering bamboo and the flowers and the fruits, they attract rats, and the rats obviously multiply and they gorge on this fruit. But then once that is depleted, then they start moving to the fields and the crops, and farmers are devastated because of it, and the government somehow just does not seem to help. And those were the kernels of the story that kind of formed into Valley of the Rats, where and well, when I used to live in Mumbai, I lived in a very old part of Mumbai, and there were rats the size of kittens. So I have had a very long and creepy connection with rats. And I said, what better than to use all of this inspiration and my horror and my fear and put it into a story. So that's how Valley of the Rats is born.
That's the strength of your books, though. You bring us and young readers to new places, to new cultures, things that most of them are not even familiar with. And I think you took us into Krish's, who's the main character, into his culture, into his family, and to the village of Imdur, which is the Valley of the Rats. And I think it's amazing that you've done this in multiple books. But what benefit do you think there is to children being exposed to different cultures?
I think it's really, really important, because most of us are sometimes in this little bubble, we are in our own little world. And I think exposing kids to what is outside of their world, to how other people live, to the challenges that they face, somehow makes them more empathetic, more accepting of the other. And I don't like using the word other, but the fact is that people do think of themselves as, us and them kind of thing. And I think when kids at a very early age are exposed to different cultures, to different ways of life, to different kinds of people, I think for some, it's kind of a window looking into a different culture. For some, it's a mirror, because I remember when I was growing up, I read a lot of Enid Blyton. And there was, just the comics of the Indian stuff. But I didn't really read too many novels with, kids like me growing up. So and for some, it's a sliding door. You can literally, step into that world and explore. So I think it's really important, so that at some point in time, my hope is that the future generations are not going to see differences between them and anyone else, but they're going to just focus on how similar are we? What are the similarities that we have? And that's why that's one of the things that I say. I love including kids from every part of the globe in my stories, settings from all over the place, not just North America. And that is also one of the reasons when I wrote Mission Mumbai, most of the stories that you see are, kids coming to North America and settling in. And this was a reversal. This was someone from North America going to India and then having to learn the rules. And I love flipping the norm just to make people aware of, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Absolutely. Well, the whole idea of the rats, for example, that one I kept thinking, there's some kids who probably have had to have dealings with rats, and there's some who've had positive ones, and then there's some who haven't had negative ones. And I wanted to know, because you speak very descriptively of the rat, and I really wanted to know, have you had any personal experience with rats, like either on an individual basis, like somebody had a rat pet as a rat, or an infestation? Like, have you had any experience like that? And if you did, how did you cope with it?
Oh my God. Well, so, okay. When I was growing up in Mumbai, there were rats in my little lane. And of course, they do their own stuff and we do our own stuff, except during monsoon, when, the places would get flooded and the drains would get flooded. And then you'd have kind of rats, dead and alive, running around. But more recently, and this is so funny, because just when I was editing The Valley of the Rats, this must have been, so the book came out in September. So this would have been sometime in summer. And I live in a rural community in BC. So I wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I go downstairs to pick up my laptop, which was charging, and I'm coming up, to the kitchen to make myself a cup of tea. This is 5:30 in the morning. And I didn't notice it on the way down, but on the way up, I see this tiny little mouse on the steps, and I was screaming. It was so cute, Helen. I mean, normally I would have seen it as a cute thing, but I just saw a rat. It was a mouse, and I was shrieking, and I had to wake up my husband, and this guy comes, he's not a morning person. He's like, what happened? What happened? And I'm like, please get this thing out. And I am editing Valley of the Rats with, the most gruesome stuff possible. So just to show that, imagination is so much braver than reality. And I wish I'd had the presence of mind to take a picture, because it was this tiny. But yeah,
Oh, wow.
so I'm always scared. I'm scared of everything that creeps or crawls or flies. I mean, I've lived with flying cockroaches, grass snakes, the tiny ones. I mean, I'm constantly screaming. But it's fun. It's fun. It's fun to put it in a novel and then, torture my main character.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because, at its heart, Valley of the Rats, it's about survival. It's a survival of a people that have been abandoned by their government and found a way to survive. We're talking about Krish, who is dealing with very challenging circumstances, and they're finding ways to cope. They have found ways to cope, and I think that they can that survival can speak to kids. And I just wanted to know what you think about what strategies of survival things kids could take from Valley of the Rats that they could apply to their own lives when they're dealing with difficult issues.
So, I mean, that's a wonderful question, Helen. And I think survival, like every one of us in no matter what walk of life we are, there are always challenges, and you always have to survive difficult situations. So I think what I would say, and this is the strategy that I also use, is believe in what you do. I firmly believe in what you do and really dig deep for courage. I would say, there are times when it's so easy to give up. It's just, I can't do this. It's not going to happen. Or, the circumstances are too much and I'm just going to fail. What you've got to understand is if you believe in what your purpose is or your cause is or your goal is, then you can dig deep and find the strength, but then also don't be afraid to ask for help. I know that for me, sometimes asking for help is difficult. For the longest time, it was a matter of pride that, I got to do it myself, or, if I ask people for help, I'm going to look weak. But then the question I ask myself is that if I had a good friend or a family member come to me for help for something, what would I think? And mine would be, I would, wholeheartedly open my arms and embrace them and help them out. And I would not think them weak, or I would not think less of them.
Absolutely.
I would actually think more of them. And that's what I had to explain to myself, that if I'm asking for help, people are not going to change the way they look at me. And
No.
You have to just reverse that. And once I changed that mindset, it was so much easier to reach out for help and also give help, wholeheartedly. And I think that's what kids need to do. There are various strategies. There are a lot of people around you that are so ready to help you, but you've got to be able to ask and accept that help.
Absolutely. And adults, we need to know that one too, because too often we're in our own heads and we think it's a sign of weakness to ask for help. Too many of us do. And then you realize that when you ask for help, because you know how much you appreciate it when someone asks for your help.
Absolutely. We
can extend the same thing to other people by doing that. So I think that whole idea, it's a great strategy. In addition to survival, though, there's the theme of conflict. That's often, something that we teach as kids. We teach them about, there's different types of conflict. There's man versus self, man versus man versus the environment, man versus society. They're all in Valley of the Rats. But which one do you think drives the story more?
You know what? I think just about everything drives the story. Conflict basically is the engine of any story. And, if you have a happy ending, no conflict, everyone lives happily ever after, we do not have a story. So one of the things that I wanted to show is, this is my this is my little planning thing when I was writing The Valley of the Rats. Now, this actually is, the 7-point story structure that I kind of plot. And it's basically, I start from the bottom of how I want the story to end. Then I go to the top, which is how the story begins. And then all the plot points in between that get me from the beginning to the end. So I often plot backwards and I write forward. But one of the things that I wanted to show you was up here initially, like when I was writing it, I actually write down all the conflicts that I can, I know you can't see too much, but this is all my planning. And there is, oh, here we go. So this is it. So when I was doing the subplots, can you see conflict, wherever I put that? So that is the first thing when I'm planning a story is, and I have my characters and I have my setting, I actually make a list of all of the things that are potentials for conflict, whether it's, again, man versus man, who, like Krish and his dad, then Krish and the shaman of the village, and then Krish and the actual village and the setting and the germs and all of that. So I actually list out all the sources of conflict, and then I slowly work them in. So yeah, that's my
I think Valley of the Rats, if there was a teacher who needed to teach conflict in story writing, Valley of the Rats covers it all. It's all there. They're going to be able to find multiple examples of everything. So I think it would be a great teaching tool if conflict was on your agenda, your teaching agenda. Definitely a book to go to. Now they should know that the book, lots of action. It is, but it's also a character study, and that's because of the main character, Krish. He's a young man who is dealing with crippling anxiety. He's got other issues that he has to deal with, but like including his father. But he's got anxiety that he's found strategies to deal with. He's got he uses hand sanitizer constantly, which I thought during this pandemic was highly relevant. He chews on candies to calm himself. So he's found different strategies that will help him deal with his anxiety. I'm curious, why did you actually choose to give him anxiety?
That's because I have quite a few anxieties myself. So there's a lot of Krish, a lot of me in Krish. And I think, all of us, we've got anxieties of a different level, different natures, and we all have different coping strategies. For me, I used to be very, very scared of public speaking. And I was kind of forced to do it when I was in the corporate sector. And I think one of my biggest, scariest moments was, at the Forest of Reading Awards for the first book, when I had to face those kids at Harborfront, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So my strategy is I chew gum. I'm not chewing gum right now because, as you can see, I'm very comfortable, talking to you. And but otherwise, so I used to chew gum. I always have hand sanitizer in my bag, even way before the pandemic. I do not like touching, bathroom doorknobs or grocery cart handles. So those are some of the things, because I had such a personal experience of it, it was easier to translate it to Krish's character. But I also wanted to show a huge change. And that is why when I was talking about the plotting, I first envisioned how would I love Krish or myself eventually to be. And then the beginning is the opposite of that. So all of the anxieties, whatever, but by the end of it, Krish does undergo some changes. He overcomes a lot of his phobias, and
absolutely.
And he grows. That's the thing. You've got to grow. It's not a bad thing to have anxieties, but as long as you can learn to live with them and change and grow, that's a step in the right direction, I think.
Absolutely. His anxiety, though, it impacts a lot about him, like the way he feels about himself, that and the way his father treats him too. But that's the sad thing. He lacks self-confidence at the beginning, and through much of the book, and much of it has to do with him comparing himself to his cousin Anjali. he's looking at her, and his father's always bringing her up to, she's the brave one, she's the optimist, she's the one who is extroverted and outgoing and everything. And he compares himself to this cousin who he sees can do no wrong and that he can never measure up to. And I know that we're all like that, adults, children alike. And I wonder what you would say to kids who feel bad about themselves when they compare themselves to others and see themselves as lacking.
That's again such a wonderful question, and I've thought a lot about it, because if adults cannot stop comparing themselves, in terms of the house that they have, or the car that they drive, or what they've achieved in life, kids kind of absorb that and they do the same thing. But sometimes I would say the parents themselves are at fault, saying, oh, your friend got this mark, why can't you? It's a standard joke in Asians, which it's a joke, but it's really not a joke. Like, a child goes up to a parent and says, Mom, I got 98% on my thing. And the parent comes back and says, what happened to the other 2%? So it's a joke, but it's also that Asian parents do have a very, very high standard on expectations. So what I would tell kids is, yes, there will be a part where, you will always be compared, but then at some point in time, sit down and see what you're good at. Celebrate what are your strengths, write them down. Probably, write down a few goals that you'd like to achieve. They could be very short-term goals, like I want to do something today, or I want to do something this month or this year. And then, evaluate what you've achieved by the end of the year. If you haven't done it, that's fine. Try again. And if you have achieved what you set out to do, then celebrate it. And my mantra or my motto now is, you only fail if you stop trying. And there are so many things that I am trying these days, something new. I fail, but I never stop. I have this goal in mind and I keep going. And now failure does not deter me at all. In fact, failure kind of spurs me on, saying, oh, okay, I didn't do it this time. I'm going to give myself more time. Maybe there are a few more skills I need to learn. Maybe I need to, just work a little bit harder at it. And I just have it in my mind that you only fail if you stop trying. That's it.
Right.
So just keep trying. And yeah.
Now, if we could just tell his father to be nicer to him. But I have a real problem with his father. I really do. He's my least liked character. But at the beginning of the book, he has a bit of wisdom where he says to Krish, argue for your limitations and they're yours. And how would you explain that one to children?
Oh, that's a good one. And I love that one too, because I am guilty of that. I mean, basically what what I'm trying to say is that if you're not good at something and you constantly give that as an excuse to people for not doing something well enough, then you somehow end up believing in it. And let me give you an example. I do not like math. I love English. I love English literature. English has always been my strong point. Numbers and math, never. So it was an excuse that I would give others. And then eventually I started believing it myself, saying, I'm not good at math. I get an allergy with numbers. And somehow that was kind of an excuse in my mind for not doing better at it, for not understanding it, for not taking the trouble to unravel what math is. And math is really actually good. It's fascinating and it helps you run a business. I mean, fast forward to now when I have my own business to run, I can't give that excuse anymore, because then I cannot run a business. So I stopped making that excuse. I took classes. I asked for help when I need to. I sit down with an accountant and I understand every step of what I'm doing. And I find that I'm fairly decent at it. So I stopped arguing for the fact that I'm not good at math, and I started making steps towards learning it. And now it's no longer a limitation. Now I will never say that I'm bad at math. I'm just say I'm improving. That's it. So don't make excuses for something you're not good at. Work at it and become better.
Absolutely. It's funny. One of the reasons I got into teaching, I had worked as an environmental consultant and as a biologist before I ever got into teaching. And I was teaching outdoor education. And I can remember classes coming and I would hear little girls in grade 4 already telling me they can't do science. They said they can't do science. Like, you're in grade 4. What do you mean you can't do science? Of course you can do science. And I remember thinking, I got to go into teaching, and I've got to go and get into science and to teach science, because that was my background. And I still remember that, because I've taught everything from JK to when we still had grade 13, and I taught grade 13 biology. And I preferred the younger kids because they hadn't been turned off science by somebody had told them that they can't do science, or they're a girl and they can't do science. And I couldn't believe that. It's like, what do you mean you can't do science? And it's that arguing for your limitations. Well, they're yours. If you think you can't do it, guess what? You probably can't at that point.
Exactly.
So anyways, I agree completely. But it's interesting because that bit of wisdom came from Krish's father. And Krish's father, as I said, he's my least favorite character. He lies, he's deceitful to his son, he's deceitful to the good people of Imdur who have rescued them. And then he has the audacity to tell Krish that he should always keep his word when he doesn't have to do that. But his son there's an expectation that his son should be that way. And I know that, I mean, as an adult, I can look at it and think, okay, you know what, that's your dad's issue. That's not yours. But he's a child. He's the child of a parent who is telling him one thing and doing another. And what advice would you give to kids who are seeing their parents are less than they expect them to be? What would you say to them? Because there are children, and there are many, because most people don't meet our expectations of them.
I know. You know what, this is a tough situation for sure. And I definitely know that in our culture, you are always expected to respect your elders, whether it's your parent or a teacher, and no questions asked. And, you know, it's tough. But what I would say is, again, if you know that you're right, if like to a child, you know, if you know that there is something that you're doing which is right and it's honest, and the person in your life, you know, whether it's a parent or an elder who is not doing the right thing, I mean, you just have to stand your ground and hope that eventually, you know, you bring them over to your side of thinking without being rude or disrespectful or, you know, having a meltdown or something like that. Just stand firm is all you can do. I mean, kids do not have a lot of agency these days. Or not these days, they basically, as a child, they don't have much agency in their life. But one of the things that no one can take away from them is their belief in, you know, in what is right and what is wrong. Someone can tell you to change your mind, but no one can actually make you do it unless you decide to do it. So stand your ground, and hopefully, you know, you will find maybe a mentor or a friend or a teacher who can back you up and understand where you're coming from, even if it is not your own, you know, parent or a family member, and just hope that they can come around to your side. That's it. But stand your ground. I mean, don't just change because someone wants you to change. And if it's something that you don't believe in or you think is dishonest, it's not much, but it's something.
Yeah, Krish is very respectful of his father. He questions him in his own mind what his father is doing, and then eventually comes out to his father to say, you know, what are you doing here? This is wrong. And I think, but you handle it so well that the respect for his father is always embedded in there. And I think for that reason, he is successful in making things right for himself and perhaps for everybody else as well. So
yeah, eventually,
I think it's great. It's handled well.
Yeah, but eventually, you know, Krish's dad, Kabir, also realizes, you know, that you know, I won't give too much detail in case there are kids that still have to read it, but yeah, he stood his ground, and I think that is important because that's something that anyone can do. You know, no one can make you believe something that you don't want to believe.
Absolutely. Not giving it too much away. I have to talk about the fact that there is a supernatural element in the book. I'm not going to tell anybody what it is because it's more like, did that really happen? But it's very intriguing, and I just wondered why you added it, because there was I could believe up until that element, and I still think, did that really happen? Why did you add that? And do you believe in the supernatural?
Well, I mean, I love this, fantasy genre. I love supernatural elements. It's just so exciting, and it adds that extra little flavor. And what I love a lot is when things are, so it's almost like magic realism, where you have everything, you have a very normal life, and then you have this one element in there that just kind of pops out. And I think that's great, because I would love to think that in life, things are ordinary. And I would say maybe my influence for this was, the Narnia series, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where, Lucy sees this ordinary wardrobe. She decides to hide from Mrs. McCready, the housekeeper who's showing some guests around. And she opens up a whole new portal. And I just love the fact that we might be surrounded by something so very ordinary, but if you look at it with different eyes, or you look at it, slightly slant, it's something extraordinary. And I love that element to it, which is why I would love, that's my influence, and I love to put it in my stories. So this somehow just came, the rats and the whole, it just happened. And I was like, okay, I'm putting this in because I had a fun time.
Well, readers will actually enjoy that, but I think they'll be like me, where you wonder, did it really happen? Did it really happen? And that's all I kept thinking about it. Did it really happen? And I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure. So I'm not sure that I would even consider your book fantasy at all, even though there's an element in it that could be it, but maybe not. So we'll leave it at that.
Magical realism. That's it. It's mostly realistic with a supernatural element.
Got it. Well, you've done well by middle grade fiction. I have to say that it's a strong suit. I know you've written, you've got picture books, you've got YA, you've got chapter books, and you've got middle grade, but middle grade is definitely your forte. It's well, your debut book won a Silver Birch Award. You have no idea how extraordinary that is. Well, you know how extraordinary it is to win a Silver Birch Award. A Forrester Reading Award is an extraordinary accomplishment that many authors will not have in their lifetime. And it's something where, kids have selected your book and said, this is extraordinary. And they know good stuff.
It means so much. It means all the more because it was selected by kids. Like, anything else is fine because it's adults thinking the kids will like it. But when the kids select it, that's why the Forrester Reading Awards is so dear to my heart.
Oh, mine as well. And I just wonder, like of all the genres you could have excelled at, like there's some that, people just stick with picture books, or they stick with YA. Why middle grade? And do you like it? Do you like middle grade? Is it the kids? Is it the writing? Is it the plotting? What is it about middle grade fiction that is such a strength for you?
I think, at heart, I'm still 12 years old. And even when I go to a bookstore or a library, I somehow veer to that section. I think that age group, I absolutely love, the grades 4, 5, 6, even when I was doing school visits, that is my favorite grade to present to, because they are so excited about reading, about books, and it's like they're exploring the world. They are finding their place in it. It's like everything is new, and they are open, their minds are open, and they're excited about things, which makes me excited about sharing my books with them. I think as you go towards YA, things change, there are lots of other changes. People get more, introspective and angsty kind of thing. And it's not a bad group, but I think I enjoy the 4, 5, 6 grades, 4, 5, 6 ages, 8 to 12. That's my favorite. Like I love writing for them. I love sharing my books, because most of the times when I present to this age group, there are so many questions. I very rarely have to do a reading. Like I know that, most authors end up doing a reading, and I have to thank Marcia Skripik for that, because she says, no, do the dialogue, do the questions. And I was like, I'm just going to read for the entire, like 10, 15 minutes or something like that. I've never had to read because there are so many questions that come from them. And I love it. I love it. So middle grade is my sweet spot, and I'm glad I'm good at it. Thank you.
Well, the new books that you've just came out. And if you want a little bit of creepy and interesting, you've got new books. I don't know if you want to tell readers about that, or listeners, but that is middle grade as well.
Yes, that is. Well, it's just, I'm coming out with this series, which is basically Goosebumps meets Asian mythology, and it's called Eerie Tales from the East. And you'll probably just find all of this stuff either on my website or Facebook. I'm just still putting it up. But the first book, which is Warned, called The Astrologers Prophecy, that's going to be coming out actually tomorrow is going to be the pub date. So yeah, you can just go on my website or Facebook and check it out. But thanks for mentioning that. And again, middle grade.
So, lots more to listen to or to read about too. And I think kids, one genre we know that there isn't enough is the little bit of the creepy, the horror, the scary, and because there's not a lot of it, they gravitate to it very quickly. So I'm sure it will be successful. Now thank you for answering those questions. We will be taking some questions from the audience, and I can see we've got a question there. I just want to remind people that there is a special offer from Cormorant DCB, the publisher of Valley of the Rats, in that very colorful little cover, and that if you order before the end of May and you order 20 books, you get 35% off, which for a school budget is substantial. If you check out the Cormorant booth at Super Conference, or there will be the email in the chat. If you look, Chantel has actually given the email info@cormorantbooks.com, and you can start ordering that way. They'll be sure to get you the 35% off. But we're just going to answer any questions that come up. So please just add them in. We've got our first question is, do you think you would ever visit the Karni Mata temple?
Nope. Absolutely not. I will see the National Geographic documentary. There is no way I am stepping anywhere close to that temple. No way. Oh my God, I am so scared of. I mean, come on, a mouse. If a mouse can scare me, 20,000 rats, not happening.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It would be a totally different experience. It would be interesting to hear from someone else who went into it. What their experiences was. It could be very spiritual. They could go in and just have a totally different experience than we might. I'm with you. We live in the country.
No.
Getting a mouse in the house is not surprising. Having the cat catch a mouse and bringing it into the house is not surprising. But I'm not happy when that happens. So going into a place like that would be just like, oh, I'm not too sure about that. So I could see, but then there'd be other people who'd be just fascinated by it, the whole idea of going into that.
Probably kids, yes, because I did see, like when you see the documentary, you'll see kids, the rats kind of running around, and the people the priests who look after the rats, they're in the kitchen and they're making the food, and the rats are sampling their food. And again, that's another horrifying aspect of it. But because you know what, it all comes from the belief that they think that the rats are people who have died and they have been reincarnated as rats. And then if they look after these rats who are their ancestors, once they die, they will come back as people. And so you have to respect them because it's basically one of your ancestors. And I don't buy that, but I'm not going to that temple.
Well, Krish obviously has a hard time with that one as well. I mean, this poor guy who's, a staunch germaphobe, using hand sanitizer all the time, and then he gets into a community where they revere rats. He can't fathom how this is going to work. They are dirty. They are dangerous. You cannot give them food. You cannot treat them like they're guests. So it was fascinating to see how he resolves that in his mind, and he does. It takes a book, but he does. Yeah. We do have another question here. It's from Emily. It says, how do you see students learning from Krish's experiences and mistakes?
So Krish initially is very, very kind of close-minded. He knows that, rats are like, of course, because he's a book nerd and he's got all of these facts and trivia in his head. He knows, he's learned that rats bring disease and you shouldn't be doing that. And so he basically shuts out everyone, but slowly he starts trusting and takes the help of someone totally unexpected, which goes completely against his belief system. But what Krish does is he keeps an open mind. He allows himself to change, to learn something new, and then to ask for help. So I think what students can also do is that you may start with one belief system, but keep an open mind, because there could always be a better way of doing it. There could be someone out there who might be able to help you overcome whatever difficulties or challenges you might be facing. So don't ever shut someone out. Keep an open mind. And that, again, in a way, it also speaks to people who are different from you. Sometimes you feel that you can only get help from someone who is like you or who understands you, but you may find that if you open up your mind to someone who is not like you, you might even just find certain similarities and accept help from them that could just change your life, which is what happened with Krish.
Yeah,
Keep
absolutely.
Keep an open mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of life lessons that come out of Valley of the Rats. You would not think it to begin a book called Valley of the Rats, but there's a lot of life lessons there, and I think it would be a great teaching novel because it has so many things in it about how to, how we're all different, but how you can find a way to accept differences and keep your own self. Like he didn't become a different person. He still had his issues, but he was accepting of other people by the end. He, as you said, he grew as a person, and accepted things differently. He started to see them from a different perspective, and that sort of fueled his growth, which was extraordinary. I think it's a great teaching tool for teachers, between the themes of survival and conflict and character studies and just personal growth. I think it has a lot to offer that way. I think
thank you.
Fascinating.
Thank you for that. Yeah, but that is why I started the book with, the night a rat bit my butt was my lucky night. I just didn't know it. Of course, that line took a long time to come to, but it was his lucky night. It did. He just didn't know it.
And there are, just so even though I say it's a little bit creepy and it certainly is interesting, there's a lot of depth to it. There are a few funny moments too. There is some humor in it because sometimes, like, when life is just throwing things at you, there's things you just gotta, and his perspective is like, are you kidding me? He sort of has there's almost a laugh in there, and so I think it lightens the mood, so that when things are happening, that we would look at it and think, oh my gosh, that's so gross. There's a different perspective on it that helps you get through it. Anyways, we have another question here from Veena. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Do you know that this rat ritual still exists?
As in the Karni Mata temple, I believe it still exists. Yeah. I haven't been there, I forgot to check the date of when that National Geographic documentary was recorded, but as far as I know, it's still there. And this ritual is still there. They still revere the rats. Everything else is made up in the book, but it was, and the other one, the PBS documentary that I saw, I believe that too is true. That still exists. I think it's every 50 years that the bamboo flowers and, it attracts the rats and all of that stuff. But, I just use these little bits of factual information and then, translate it into a story. But I think the Karni Mata temple is still there.
Veena actually does say thank you for your answer. The interesting thing for me is right there. I don't know if you realize that, but you've just given another science lesson. That whole idea about the bamboo flowering and the rats coming in, whatever. It's very much a sort of a balance of nature that you can teach, where population studies, where this population increases, this population increases, this population decreases, this population decreases, or moves on. It's amazing. Like this book, you can use it for science, for English, and sort of guidance. It's throughout this thing, geography, cultures, so social, like it's amazing. So I thought, yeah, I could see that. That would be the populations as they change, and what happens. The other thing is what happened to the people, because when you have an infestation that decimates a crop and then it goes to something else, what happens to the people who don't have any other choices? So I think that yeah, I think that it's a nice little package. It's got a lot of things in there.
I hope teachers are listening. Thank you.
Well, I taught grade 6 for many years. It's the kind of book that I would love to take in and just parse it apart, because I could use it for everything. It's just so cross curricular, and not all books are like that, but I could do a lot with that book. So that would be great.
Thank you so much.
Vina, thank you. I'm glad I pronounced your name correctly. I don't know if we have any other questions. I don't see any other questions here. I know that, I think that we can start to just sum up. I just finish off. I would like to thank Mahtab, because it's been absolutely delightful to interview, see you again, which I haven't for many years, because you've been on the West Coast now, and I'm here in Ontario. And it's just to chat about a new book and your new book, which are always a treat for me. And I hope that everybody who's listened to this will go and check out Valley of the Rats for your middle grade readers. Okay, it'll be worth it. And do check out the deal that Cormorant and DCB have for Valley of the Rats, and Chantal has given that. And I'll just leave the last few words to Mahtab.
So thank you so much, Helen. The admiration and the love is mutual. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, because I loved all your questions. And what I tell the teachers, and if you're sharing this with your students, is that one, keep reading. Please keep exposing your students to as much diverse literature as you can get your hands on, because there is some amazing stuff available in Canada right now. And the sooner you start, the more, I would say, empathetic and responsible your students are going to be growing up to be. And I know that I owe a lot to my my English teacher, my librarians, who would love, who would share books with me and encourage me to read. So you would be changing someone's life by putting a good book in their hands. So just keep reading and keep sharing. And thank you so much for whoever attended today.
And Chantal, will you end the seminar, or do we just say goodbye to everybody?
I will end it now. Thank you everyone for coming, and have a great day.
Yes, thank you.